Alrighty, let us wrap this up by talking about different types of polls. I've tried to use some of the language as we've been talking and looking at some of the data that we've looked at over time. Okay, so the first type that I have up here is called a benchmarked poll. You can think of this as kind of like a pretest or a litmus test, right? It sets the basic or the bench. So typically what happens is before a candidate even formally announces that they're going to like run for office and like files their paperwork, they might hire someone to do some polling. The purpose of this is to kind of get a read on how people feel about a particular topic so that they can finalize their views and their stance before announcing that they're running for office on a certain set of policies, right? So they want to kind of get a feel for how the American public feels so that they can finalize their issues or their stances that they're going to use in their campaign purpose. Okay, they want to strategically target people with that information. Normally when they do this, they don't necessarily give it to a huge group of people. They give it to what is called a focus group. A focus group is typically between like 10 and 30 people. And they sit around and they engage more in like genuine conversation with them rather than having them like fill out bubble sheet type questionnaires, okay? But either way, the purpose of a benchmark is for someone who is thinking about running for office to kind of get the feel of what public opinion is before they make that formal announcement that they are in fact running for office. Okay. The second type of poll that is listed here is called a tracking poll. That is what you are looking at on the right-hand side. We have looked at several of these already over the course of this unit. A tracking poll is just a poll that is used over time. They take a poll and they administer relatively the same poll, right? It's the same set of questions or the same question, and they might do it as this poll suggests in August, and then in September, and then in October, and then in November, right? Or maybe they give it every 5 days or every 10 days. But it is looking at public opinion or public views over a period of time, right? It is tracking the opinion. So that's the key thing that you need to remember there. Okay, right? So this next one, I combined those together. These are exit and entrance polls. They are actually administered outside of a poll. And I want to kind of specify, right? Polling is something that you do to pull or get information. But when we talk about voting, the place that you go vote is also called the polling place, right? Or the voting location. Leave it to English, right? One word has like 5 different meanings, okay? And we are talking about it in the context of poll to ask people questions, but also poll, the location where you go vote, okay? So what happens at an exit or entrance poll is surveyors will actually be at the polling location. They have to be certain distance away per polling regulations. And they will ask people that are going in, who are you intending on voting for? Or who did you vote for? And then they use that information to try to determine, right, what is the outcome of the election going to be, or what are some demographic trends? Because in the United States, we use what is called an Australian ballot, which basically just means everyone is guaranteed complete secrecy in voting. And so who you vote for is not shared with anyone unless you explicitly decide that you want to share that information with somebody. And so pollsters that want to do this type of thing, right, to try to get that information right off at the time of the election are going to have to ask the actual voters themselves, because there's no way that they could access that information otherwise, because we have the right to our privacy in our voting choices that we choose to make. Okay. This one is probably the easiest to remember. It is called an approval poll, and it literally is just a poll that asks whether or not you approve of the actions of a particular official, or do you approve of a particular policy or decision in government. The image that you are looking here comes from Gallup, right? I've showed you a lot of stuff from the Pew Research Institute, which is a really big polling institution that is reliable. Gallup is another one. It was actually one of the first survey institutions that we used in the United States. right? So this poll is looking at approval ratings, specifically at the 100-day mark. That is typically when we do like a first litmus assessment, large scale, of a presidential person, like a newly inaugurated president, and how they're doing at the very beginning of their term. Okay, so approval rating or approval poll is literally just that, asking the people how much do they approve of a particular thing. All right, so that kind of wraps up the types of polls. I've used this language, but I also want to just kind of make sure that I solidify it for you to put in your notes. All right, these are major polling institutions within the United States. They do polling, they express their methodology, so they're relatively reliable. So if you are seeing polling data that was conducted by Gallup or Pew or Rasmussen or Harris, you can trust it. Okay. If it's not one of these institutions, I'm not saying that the polling data isn't trustworthy and reliable, but you're going to want to make sure that you follow up and ask, well, how did they collect the data? Who did they ask, right? Just because someone is giving you numbers or statistics doesn't mean you can just trust it, okay? So with that, just kind of look at a little bit of data here, right? This one is a Gallup poll so that you can see what it looks like. It is approval poll. This one is also an approval poll. It's conducted by Rasmussen. It's also a tracking poll because it is looking at some of the time when President Trump was in office and what his approval rating was over the month of January, which was the first like little kind of chunk of time when he was there. Okay. The one on the bottom left is a Harris poll. And again, it's looking at approval ratings. The one on the upper right-hand corner is a Pew Research poll. And it was looking at the divide in opinion on some of these wedge issues that we talked about in class the other day, or whether or not you lean a particular way based on what organization you're in. Okay. All right. With that, one last little final thing. When you think about quantitative data, I want you to make sure that you're asking a couple of really important questions, right? Who conducted the research? And you don't need to write this one down, okay? Who conducted the research? Are they transparent with their methodology? Meaning, do they share it? Are they open with it? Did they tell you how they did it? Okay, what was the purpose of their research, right? Are they biased? How did they acquire the data? How many subjects did they have? What was their margin of error? Okay, those are things to think about. This is the end of your required stuff. There is one more video in this lecture set. It's the one that you're looking at right now that is talking about the trustability of polls. I suggest watching it, but I am not going to require that you watch it, okay? So if you're finished watching all of the videos in this section, you are free to click done and you have finished your assignment for the day. See you tomorrow. Have a great one.